Leonard and Violet had been married for 11 years, a fact they celebrated quietly each September with a bottle of red wine and takeout from their favourite Italian spot. Their life in the suburbs of Hartford was unremarkable, filled with school runs, mortgage payments, and the occasional weekend hike. Leonard worked as a financial analyst, his days a blur of spreadsheets and client calls, while Violet managed a small boutique downtown. Their daughter, Iris, had just turned 8, her laughter a constant soundtrack to their evenings. They met in college, two introverts drawn together during a study group. Leonard, with his quiet intensity and knack for numbers, balanced Violet's artistic whims and tendency to daydream. Back then, they'd spend hours in the library, stealing glances over textbooks, their fingers brushing when reaching for the same highlighter. Their wedding was modest, held in her parents' backyard, with string lights and homemade pies. For years, their love felt like a well-worn sweater, comfortable, reliable, always there. But comfort, Leonard would later realize, could be a slow poison. The first crack appeared during Violet's promotion. She'd been offered a managerial role at a larger boutique in the city, a position that demanded longer hours and weekend events. Leonard supported her, of course. He'd always admired her drive, but he didn't anticipate how her absence would hollow out their routines. Dinners became silent affairs, their conversations reduced to logistical updates. Iris needs new sneakers. The plumber's coming Tuesday. Did you pay the electric bill? Then there was Adrian. He entered Violet's life as a vendor, a supplier of handcrafted jewellery for the boutique. Leonard first heard his name over breakfast, when Violet mentioned offhandedly that Adrian had recommended a new artisan collective in Vermont. He's got an eye for quality, she said, stirring her coffee a bit too long. Leonard nodded, half listening, his mind already on a looming deadline. But Adrian's name kept resurfacing, in Violet's texts, which buzzed late into the night, in her laughter, sudden and bright, during phone calls she took in the backyard, in the way she'd linger at work to finalize orders, returning home with flushed cheeks and stories that always seemed to circle back to him. He's just a friend, she insisted one evening, when Leonard asked why Adrian's number was saved under jewellery rep in her phone. You know how chaotic the supply chain is these days. Leonard wanted to believe her. He did believe her, until the Thursday he showed up unannounced at her boutique. It had been Iris's idea. Let's surprise Mom with cupcakes. She'd pleaded after school, clutching a pink box from the bakery. Leonard hesitated. Violet hated surprises, but Iris's grin was impossible to refuse. They parked outside the boutique at 6:15 p.m., the steel OC sign already flipped. Through the frosted glass, Leonard saw silhouettes. Violet, her back to the window, and a tall figure leaning against the counter. Adrian. Iris darted forward, ringing the bell. Mom, we brought you. The figures jerked apart. When Violet opened the door, her smile was too wide, her lipstick smudged. Sweetheart. What a... surprise. Adrian hovered behind her, adjusting his cufflinks. His shirt was untucked. We didn't mean to interrupt, Leonard said, the words ash in his mouth. You're not. Violet scooped Iris into a hug, avoiding Leonard's gaze. Adrian was just leaving. The man nodded, slipping past them with a muttered goodbye. Leonard watched him go, noting the scuff on his left shoe, a detail he'd obsess over later, replaying the scene like a corrupted file. That night, Violet fell asleep early, claiming a migraine. Leonard scrolled through her phone, password unchanged, a relic of trust, and found nothing. No texts, no calls. Just a deleted photo album named Vermont Trip. He stared at the ceiling, Iris's steady breathing echoing down the hall. The cracks were widening. Weeks passed in a tent to tent. Violet worked later. Leonard took up running, pounding the pavement until his lungs burned. They still attended Iris's soccer games, still hosted Thanksgiving for Violet's parents. But in the spaces between, the silent car rides, the turned backs in bed, Leonard felt the truth curdling. Then came the conference. Violet's company was hosting a weekend retreat in Boston. It's mandatory, she said, folding blouses into a suitcase. All the regional managers have to be there, including Adrian. The question slipped out, sharp and brittle. Violet froze. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget it. She zipped the bag too forcefully. You're being paranoid, Leo. The pet name, unused in months, stung more than the accusation. While she was gone, Leonard fixated on the boutique's Instagram. Scrolled through tagged photos of Violet laughing at a cocktail hour, Adrian's hand grazing her lower back. A video of her dancing at a hotel bar, her head thrown back, alive in a way she hadn't been at home in years. On Sunday night, she returned with a souvenir keychain for Iris and a tired kiss for Leonard. Her suitcase smelled like hotel soap and someone else's cologne. He waited until she was in the shower to check her email. 2. Adrian Cole from Violet Hart's subject. Tonight. I can't stop thinking about the rooftop. We shouldn't have, but God, I don't regret it. When can I see you again? The screen blurred. Leonard's hands shook as he navigated to the trash folder, finding nothing. Deleted, of course. He stood in the dim glow of the laptop, the shower still running, and made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd follow her. Leonard's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Across the street, Violet's boutique glowed under the afternoon sun, its display windows adorned with autumn garlands. She'd told him she was working late to prepare for a holiday pop-up, another mandatory event. But the lie tasted metallic in his throat. He'd taken the day off, citing a dentist appointment. Iris, oblivious, had skipped into school with a lunchbox full of heart-shaped sandwiches. Now, parked 2 blocks down, Leonard watched the boutique's entrance through binoculars, feeling equal parts ridiculous and desperate. At 3:07 p.m., Adrian's silver Lexus pulled into the alley behind the store. Leonard's pulse spiked. He counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The back door opened, and Violet stepped out, her auburn hair loose, wearing the emerald green dress he'd bought her last anniversary. She glanced over her shoulder before slipping into the passenger seat. Leonard followed at a distance, his rental car, a nondescript grey sedan, blending into traffic. They drove north, past the city limits, toward a cluster of rental cabins nestled in the woods. A team-building retreat, Violet had called it. But there were no corporate vans, no name tags, just Adrian's Lexus rolling to a stop outside cabin 12. Back home, Leonard paced the kitchen, Iris's crayon drawings rattling on the fridge with each pass. He'd taken photos, grainy, damning shots of Violet laughing as Adrian unlocked the cabin door. But evidence alone couldn't bridge the chasm between suspicion and action. That night, Violet returned with pine needles in her hair and a story about hiking trails. Leonard said nothing. Instead, he began compiling a list, a forensic accountant's approach to heartbreak. 1. Charges at the Maple Inn, dated every Thursday for the past 2 months. 2. A receipt for 2 champagne flutes from a boutique in Burlington, a city Violet had never mentioned visiting. 3. A missed call from Adrian, logged at 2:14 a.m. on their anniversary. He stored it all in a manila envelope tucked behind his tax files. Insurance, he told himself. But really, it was a lifeline, proof he wasn't imagining the collapse. The confrontation came on a rain-swept Tuesday. Iris was at a sleepover, the house silent save for the tick of the hallway clock. Violet sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through supplier emails, her glasses perched low on her nose. Leonard placed the envelope between them. "What's this?" she asked, not looking up. "Open it." She did, slowly, her expression flattening as she sifted through the receipts, the photos. When she reached the shot of Kevin 12, her breath hitched. "Leo." "How long?" His voice was eerily calm. Violet removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like you've been team building with Adrian every Thursday afternoon." A tear slid down her cheek, smudging her mascara. "It just happened. We were stressed, and he listened and I didn't." Leonard's composure cracked. "I'm your husband. You could have talked to me." "You stopped seeing me." She shot back, her voice rising. Every conversation was about bills or Iris or work. With him, I felt wanted, like I wasn't just someone's mom or wife. The words hung between them, sharp and suffocating. Leonard stared at her, the woman who'd once blushed when he read her poetry, now a stranger in a rumpled cardigan. "Pack your things," he said finally. "You can stay at your sister's." The divorce was swift, clinical. Violet moved into a downtown apartment, her once shared belongings reduced to cardboard boxes. Iris, confused but resilient, split her time between homes, her backpack perpetually stuffed with stuffed animals and homework. Leonard threw himself into parenting, into work, into anything that dulled the ache. But grief, he learned, was a patient hunter. It found him in quiet moments, when Iris asked why Mommy didn't join their Saturday pancakes, or when he passed the Italian restaurant, its string lights still twinkling. At the boutique, Violet's absence went unacknowledged. Adrian, rumor had it, transferred to the Chicago branch. A promotion, some said. A retreat, others whispered. The staff avoided Leonard's gaze when he dropped off Iris's forgotten lunchbox, their pity-a-living thing. It was Iris who stumbled upon the final twist. "Mom's friend is sleeping over again," she mentioned one evening, colouring at the kitchen table. Leonard froze, a dish slipping from his hand. "Which friend?" "The one with the loud laugh. He makes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." Adrian. The name went unspoken, but Leonard felt it in the room, a ghost pulling up a chair. That night he drove past Violet's apartment, parked beneath a street lamp, and watched shadows move behind drawn blinds. Two figures, close then merging. He expected rage, a desire to scream, to smash something. Instead, he felt nothing, a hollowed-out quiet. Years later, at Iris's high school graduation, Leonard spotted Violet across the auditorium. She stood alone, clapping politely, her once vibrant hair streaked with grey. Adrian, he'd heard, had left her for a younger woman, a poetic symmetry that offered no comfort. After the ceremony, she approached him, hesitant. "She looks so grown-up," Violet said, nodding toward Iris, who was laughing with friends. "She is." Leonard adjusted his tie, the silence stretching. "I'm sorry, Leo, for everything." He studied her, the crow's feet, the chipped nail polish, the faint scar on her wrist from a long-ago baking mishap. The woman he'd loved, now a museum exhibit behind glass. "So am I," he said, and meant it. They didn't hug, didn't cry, just nodded, two satellites drifting into separate orbits, as Iris waved them over for photos. That night, Leonard sat on his porch, a half-finished beer in hand. The stars blinked indifferently, and the cicadas hummed their old song. He thought of Violet's apology, of the years lost to silence and secrets. Regret, he realized, was the only heirloom they'd shared. But there was Iris, bright, bold Iris, sprinting across the lawn with sparklers, her laughter carving light into the dark. Leonard smiled, a fragile, hopeful thing, and stepped into the yard to join her.